I'm Joyce Tischler, your worship associate today. And the topic of this service is Deep Roots, New Beginnings. And it's inspired me to think this week about my own roots, which is not easy or straightforward for me. I grew up in New York City, and I never felt rooted there. Everyone's constantly rushing around, and everything's always changing in New York. On top of that, I grew up in a borough called Queens. Aspiring actors, writers, artists, designers, they don't go to Queens. There's nothing in Queens. No traditional music comes from Queens, right? No definable culture. Brooklyn is cool again. Queens never was and never will be. My ancestors came, well, if you go back enough, Russia, and then into Eastern Europe, Austria, Poland, Croatia, and other parts of Eastern Europe. And they came to the U.S. before World War I. They cut off their roots so that they could escape from persecution for the crime of being Jewish. And they sought a better life here. But from an early age, living in New York where they had settled, I felt as if I belonged somewhere else, someplace where life moves more slowly, where people take the time to notice each other and say hello. I know a man who has lived in many places, but his family has a farm in Illinois that's been in the family for 125 years. And he always ends up living there, going back there. His roots run deep. When I visited Great Britain and Europe, now those people have roots, right? They know exactly where their ancestors came from, not just the country, but the city, the street maybe even. They haven't lost that connection. There are buildings and parks and monuments in European cities that are old and magnificent, and you can feel their history as you walk from one place to another. I have a friend, Kim, who lives in Hastings, which is a city on the southeast coast of England, looks out on the English Channel. It's known for the Battle of Hastings, 1066. I visited him there a couple of years ago, and as we walked around Hastings, he pointed out various things. And at one point, he pointed to a corner where there was rubble. And he said, well, that was bombed in World War II. And I thought, oh, people remember that kind of stuff. We visited a house a few blocks away from there that was built in the 15th century. It was still relatively unchanged. We were able to walk around that house. Roots run deep over there. People know who they are. I escaped from New York in 1975, and I moved to California. And finally, I had reached a place where I wanted to plant my own roots. I had a love affair with California. I still do. I loved living in the Bay Area. It was my home and my small corner of this big world. I identified as a Californian, a feeling that had eluded me for the 21 long years I lived in New York. Leaving the Bay Area after 40 years to take a job in Oregon was wrenching. I tore away from my roots, and it still pains me. And as beautiful as Oregon is, and as friendly as people are, coming here was coming to the unfamiliar, coming to not home. But time passes. What felt like a deep hole in my heart has started to come alive again, much like ground that has been cleared down to the dirt, but eventually starts to grow plant life. If you open your heart and wait patiently, roots can grow. I live across the street from a forest, which I couldn't even imagine when I lived in New York. And even though part of that forest was cut down to build the houses where I live, the forest keeps coming back every summer and taking root in my backyard. It remembers its roots. I've met people at this church who are becoming my friends. Many of these people have deep roots, and they can trace their family back for generations, like the Browns, and they are proud Oregonians. It's now been about 5 years, I have begun to see all the beauty and all the good that I am surrounded by, and I'm beginning to plant my roots again here. After all, Oregon has fertile soil, lots of water, and occasionally some sun. And UUCWF is central to that. I show up here every Sunday, not because I don't have anything better to do, but because I want to be here. This is my place. These are my people. If I spend the time and carefully tend to them lovingly, my roots will be here. Perhaps my daughter Marcia will raise a family here. Who knows? Perhaps I will be the beginning of new roots in a new place. And that would be nice. I would like that.
Our reading today is from Starhawk. It's called Community Means Strength. We are all longing to go home, to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned. We can only catch glimpses from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will be open to revive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends. Somewhere we can be free. When we've done surveys of the congregation, the first question we tend to ask is, why do you come here? What keeps you coming back? And the number one answer every single time is community. Now, people say that in different ways. For some folks, this has been their church for 40 or 60 years, and most of their friends are here. For some folks, it's the religious education program and the fact that their kids have friends and they have other people to help their kids learn values. For some people, they're newer to the area or going through some kind of life change and wanting to build community, and this big pink church seems like the best fit. Some of us came seeking a way to nurture our own spiritual lives. What a concept. Some folks don't care so much about church per se, but deeply value the connections they've made here through the forum or the men's group or the book club. And for others, this kind of scary world, frankly, demands that we build community that shares our values. And the Sunday services give them the grounding and the strength that they need to go out into the world each week and keep going. And I have heard sometimes from some members that we need to go out and recruit new members because we need more pledging units, or we need a new set of volunteers. Does that work? Desperation is never attractive. But what does work? Being the kind of community that people want to be a part of. We'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. A year ago, on this very day, we celebrated the 100th year anniversary of this building. We are very proud of our building, the big pink church across the street from the library, the one with the beautiful stained glass windows. We've been a central part of the community as a congregation for 180 years. When three men, a Baptist, a Presbyterian, and a Congregationalist met to form a free church alternative to the Catholic and Methodist missions that were already in town. We were Presbyterian for a hot minute until the Presbyterians started wanting more control, and then we quickly dissolved and reformed that very day as the First Congregational Society of Oregon City. The articles of this incorporation were as follows. The object of this corporation shall be to promote justice, to defend the separation of church and state, to defend the right of each man to seek his God according to the dictates of his own conscience, to long for the right and the merciful, to pity the suffering and assist the weak, to forget wrongs and remember benefits, to promote education and defend our public schools, to love the truth and speak honest words, to defend our American heritage of freedom and to acknowledge Jesus of Nazareth as its spiritual head and recognize his teaching in faith, ethics, and discipline. Now, I will say that we've grown away from acknowledging Jesus as our spiritual head, but the parts about the separation of church and state, the right of each individual, we can go broader than men here, to have their own understanding of God or spirituality according to their own conscience, loving the truth and speaking honest words, promoting education and assisting folks who need some help, knowing that we all need help sometimes. These are values that have stood the test of time and are as true today as they were then. Today, the Unitarian Universalist Association, of which we are a member, defines our central values as justice, equity, transformation, interdependence, pluralism, and generosity, all centered in love. Justice and equity. Each person is inherently worthy and should be treated with dignity and compassion. Everyone gets a vote and a say. Transformation. We believe that science is real and truth isn't sealed. We believe in growth and change. Interdependence. We are all a part of the universe, as is everything else on Earth. We need one another. And we're part of the interdependent web of all creation, and that means we need to take care of it. Generosity. We take care of each other. We use our time, talent, and treasure to build inclusive, accessible communities where everybody gets to thrive. And pluralism. We believe that there isn't just one way to be religious or spiritual. Every person can follow their own path. We are both independent and interdependent, alike and different. We have our own paths, but we do share some values. And we are unabashedly a liberal church in a somewhat more conservative area than our neighbors just north of us. We need security at our Pride events. Some of our schools tried to ban books, like recently. And this being a liberal church in a more conservative area is a fundamental part of who we are. When I arrived as your minister, I met folks in town who thought a female minister was a novelty. But you've had some since the 90s. Part of who we are is the big pink church that hosts the queer youth group and the AA meetings and folk time. We've gone through at least 5 names in our 180 years. Shortly after I arrived, in a process begun by Jerry Spriggs, the church held a vote to change our name from Atkinson Memorial Church. After over 140 suggestions and some polling and pre-voting, we were clear that we wanted Unitarian Universalist in the name. It was time to be clearer about who we were. And we wanted congregation instead of church. And so in February of 2016, we voted to change our name to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Willamette Falls. And after changing our name, we got new signage that much more clearly stated who we were and what our values were. I know that some of you are here because you saw those signs and thought, that sounds good. I can believe that. Who here is here partly because of those signs? Wow. It can be scary sometimes to be open about who we are, especially right now. But people can't find us if they don't know who we are. And we are here to be a place for those who need us, who need connection, who need hope, who need a liberal spiritual community. I often say that we don't come to church because it'll get us into heaven or save us from hell. Instead, we come to church because it helps us to become better people. And by better people, I mean more kind, more just, and more compassionate. Emily Amick, the author of Democracy in Retrograde, who writes on Substack as Emily in Your Phone, wrote a great column on Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. In it, she writes that Frankl discovered that the meaning of life is to have a purpose. And she writes that that is what we need to do now. The antidote to helplessness isn't just hope, she writes, it's purpose. We all have access to that, even when we're totally overwhelmed. I think it's important to reframe how we think about the exhaustion caused by doom scrolling. It's not just digital fatigue, it's hunger for meaningful engagement. The existential vacuum thrives on passive consumption and isolation, but it cannot survive contact with purposeful action and genuine connection. Every time you choose to attend a local meeting or have a real conversation with your neighbor about community issues instead of arguing with strangers online, you are creating meaning. She continues, the beauty of this approach is that it transforms us and our communities. When you engage with purpose rather than rage, when you choose action over cynicism, you start to weave yourselves back into the fabric of your community. You discover that while you can't control everything happening in the political sphere, you absolutely can control how you show up in your own corner of the world. You can hold out your hand to someone who needs help. The headlines often distract us and keep us disengaged just when we need to engage the most. And I will add, it is easier to do that in a group than it is to do it alone. In an era where democracy is under threat, just in the last week, this administration has gotten late-night talk show hosts fired, has fired a prosecutor who couldn't get the president's enemies indicted because they didn't do anything wrong, and is trying to fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board. Free speech is under fire on so many levels, and immigrants and trans folks and people who agree with the United Nations that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide are all being threatened. We need each other now, more than ever. We need a group of people to be with who want the world to be better and who realize that we can't make it better by ourselves. And it's okay to have different ideas about what it needs to be better. That's okay. But the thing we also need to realize is that we are not responsible individually for returning democracy, stopping climate change, and creating a world of equality and peace single-handedly. Our job is to do something together. Through this place, that something could be working at the food pantry once a month. It could be bringing a meal to someone who needs one. It could be encouraging a child. It could be advocating for voting rights. It could be resting enough that you can get up on Monday morning and keep doing this. The Talmud says, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. My friends, this congregation has deep roots that have weathered changes and storms before. We celebrate new beginnings in the faces of children and newcomers and new initiatives every day. If you feel like this is a place that can support and help you with whatever you are doing to make your corner of the world more kind, more just, and more compassionate, then you are welcome here. Emily Amick says, "The future isn't predetermined. It's shaped by our choices, our voices, and most importantly, the meaning we create through our actions. Every time you engage in civic life, whether through voting or volunteering or speaking up, you're not just participating in democracy. You're declaring what matters to you, what you stand for, and who you choose to be in this moment. Even in our most overwhelmed moments, we have the freedom to choose how to respond." My friends, I invite you to respond as a member of an intergenerational community rooted in love, focused on justice and compassion. It's better together. We're better together. Blessed be, and amen.